has a story, and what I really firmly believe is that we're talking about mental health, we're talking about, personality, we're talking about people living good, healthy, flourishing lives. I think just telling those stories or just being aware of those stories is really important, because who you are now is kind of it's really affected by where you came from.
Welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast. We are erasing shame about mental health by having honest talk for healthy living. We are so glad you can join us.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Erasing Shame summer series on mental health. I'm Jeremiah Chuang, and today we're going to be talking with Dan Zhang about family dynamics. Hello.
Hi.
Cool. Good to see you again, Dan.
Yeah.
After our intro episode. Cool. Your expertise and your profession is doing a good service for our communities. Yeah.
Thanks.
Could you tell us, and you told us a little bit about your family background and your interest in family dynamics. So could you tell us about your family background?
Sure, yeah. My family background is, everyone has a story. So I guess I'll start there. Everyone has a story, and what I really firmly believe is that we're talking about mental health, we're talking about, personality, we're talking about people living good, healthy, flourishing lives. I think just telling those stories or just being aware of those stories is really important, because, who you are now is kind of, it's really affected by where you came from. It's really affected by how you grew up. It's affected by your immigration story. It's affected by your family of origin. So I guess in our first episode we teased out just a little bit about my family story. And I guess I'm fourth generation Chinese American, and so my great grandfather on my mother's side came to the States around the turn of the century, probably around 1900, 1902, somewhere in there. He wanted to come to America to have a better life for himself. His plan was to come to the States, find work, send money back to China to support his family. There were around the turn of the century, there were Chinese exclusion laws in place in the United States that barred specifically Chinese laborers from coming over and finding work. That was mostly to protect the earlier generations of immigrants that had come. And so my great-grandfather was in for a rude awakening when he got his boat and got to the States. It was turned away from New York, and he was forcibly removed with everyone else on the boat in Mexico. So there were these group of Chinese folks that came over looking for work in America, and just found themselves in Mexico through no fault of their own, but just through circumstances. And so he had to find himself, he had to reinvent himself. He had to find a way to survive, find a way to thrive. So he did. And even now, today, there are Chinese communities just across the border in the Southwest and into Mexico that persist from these kind of days of the Chinese exclusion laws. My grandfather got to the States through a lot of historical, there's a lot of historical, I guess, stories that intersect with his. Around this time, there was Mexico and the U.S. were kind of at war in terms of having border disputes in the Southwest. So a general who became president of Mexico, Pancho Villa, would organize these border raids into the U.S. And when he did that, of course, the U.S. responded. They sent an expedition down to find him, bring him to justice. That expedition was led by another person who became president of the U.S., in this case, General Pershing. So General Pershing goes down to find Pancho Villa, is finding not very well planned out. Didn't find a lot of help from the indigenous Mexican people. They weren't going to give up Pancho Villa. They weren't going to help him in any kind of way. The people that would help him, though, was the Chinese community in the Southwest at that time. They did what Chinese folks do. They survived. They find a way to make it work. So they took jobs doing laundry, cooking food for General Pershing's expedition. Long story short, Pershing never finds Pancho Villa. He has to go back to the U.S. without Pancho Villa. But he understands exactly how much danger the Chinese folks that helped him out were in, because when Pancho Villa found out that there were some Chinese folks helping Pershing, that they would face a lot of trouble, most likely. General Pershing writes a letter to the president at the time saying that there are this group of Chinese people in Mexico that helped us, and if we leave them there, if we bar them from entering the country with us, they're in, I think the term was, they're in great mortal peril or something like that. They're in danger if we don't let them in under the Chinese exclusion laws. So this group of Chinese people that helped out Pershing became known as Pershing's Chinese. And they were let into the country under these exclusion laws at the time, and so that's how my great grandfather got here. Fast forward, he calls to China and gets his son over, which is my grandfather, and from there they bring their first two daughters over. My mom is the first American-born daughter in that family, and so that has a lot to that story. In that story, you'll find a lot of what makes me, I think. One of the examples I can say is that it can kind of share, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, is that my mom, being the firstborn kid in America who spoke pretty good English, was called upon to do a lot of the outward-facing kind of parentified or parental things that parents normally would probably do if they spoke better English. So she spoke to the anything official, anything that had to be read, she would have to read it. She would have to tell my grandparents about what it was. She would have to make decisions in the grocery store that they ran. She would have to order things. She had worked in a grocery store at a very young age. And, she had that experience, but then she looked around her at her friends who maybe didn't have that dynamic in their families. They didn't have so much responsibility. They were allowed just to be kids. And I think there's a part of that. There's a part for that noticed that and questioned. Okay, so what's the deal with my family here? Why am I the one that all this responsibility is placed upon? Why am I the one that has to do all these things for my family? And I can't just be a kid sometimes. So. In therapy and in the psychobabble that we use sometimes, it's called parentification, right? When a child takes on a lot more responsibility than maybe their peers do, because of their family dynamics. That affects how you raise your kids. That affects how you want them to grow up, and family dynamics matter. Immigration stories matter, in the work that we do.
Yeah, they sure do. What was one of the ways that the way your mom grew up, how did that affect you personally?
Yeah, it's funny because when you're a kid, when you're growing up in the situation and you see these aspects coming out in your parents, and of course as a teenager you're like, why is that? And there's a lot of, in my generation, teenage angst and some bitterness and some anger, and those things happen. But the thing that we try to do here is we try to talk about these stories, and we say, okay, yes, this did happen. Yes, this is your family. We're not giving any value judgments on this. We're not saying this is right or wrong, but how does this affect you? So one of the things that being a parentified, I guess, child in my mom's case. She had a lot of responsibility. She had a lot of. She had to worry about a lot of things. So she had to be responsible for the store. She had to be responsible for talking to people. There was a lot of burden placed on her by my grandparents. So she worries a lot. So in sum, she turns out to be a worrier. And as a worrier, if your parents are worriers, they tend to be very anxious, and they tend to kind of almost transmit anxiety onto the people around them. So, being her kid, being her firstborn kid, that anxiety kind of transfers over to me sometimes, right? So I'm asked to do a lot of things. I'm asked to help her, not just with, just, we don't have a store anymore, but not just with those responsibilities, but helping her, almost help her with her anxiety, I should say, So things that she's very, very anxious about, she wants me to worry about those things as well, even even if I'm not worried about them, or even if I know things are going to be okay, that you should be worried about this. You should help me with this anxiety that I have. And once you get pulled into that, you start to question as the kid now. Well, should I be worried about that? Did I miss something? I thought I did a good job of understanding what was going on, taking care of the situation, but my mom was really worried, so maybe I missed something. And so slowly that just erodes your own sense of confidence, your own sense of who you are, your own sense that you can do a good job, because someone who you should be able to look up to as a sense of calm, as a sense of peace, they're worried, so maybe I should be worried too.
And then what did you do to try and find more confidence, or how did you figure out ways to worry less?
I think a lot of it is understanding the story, understanding where my mom came from. Like I said, as a teenager, you get angry, you get bitter, you get angsty. But at the end of the day, if you understand your family's story, you can approach the people in that story with a lot more grace, a lot more forgiveness, because my mom didn't choose to be in that situation. My mom didn't choose to be the parentified child. She didn't choose to speak English better than everybody else. She didn't choose to be the firstborn kid in America. That's the kind of situation she was put into. And once you start there, once you start with that forgiveness and that sense of grace to those in your family, you're allowed to kind of let them off the hook a little bit. So everything that I experience as far as all this anxiety heaped upon me, understanding where it came from allowed me to let go of that a little bit, and then really think about, okay, so I know it's happening. I know it's happening to me. It's eroding my confidence. It's eroding my sense of self. How do I? The question becomes, okay, if I can let her off the hook now, what's left? It's working on myself. It's finding spaces where I can truly thrive. I can truly say that, yes, I did do a good job of thinking through this. I did do a good job of following through with this. There's nothing I need to be worried about. I'm safe. I'm safe in my own experience. And yeah, drawing a couple little boundaries here and there, saying that, okay, well, this belongs to me. My anxiety, I'm worried about this, so that belongs to me. Other people's anxiety, other people's worry, that's not mine. That doesn't belong to me, so I don't have to carry that. And drawing those boundaries is helpful because it's not a rejection of my mom. It's not a rejection or invalidating my mom and saying that, no, you shouldn't be worried about stuff. Fact of the matter, she is. She is worried about stuff. Drawing a boundary is actually something that really defines what's mine and what's someone else's. So once I kind of learned that, okay, I can deal with my own stuff. I can deal with my own anxiety, and it's mine. I can deal with that, so it's right. But dealing with someone else's is not something that I can do or should be able to do. I shouldn't have to carry that person's burdens. By stating those things, by making those distinctions, I can say, okay, I can separate my mom from that anxiety. I can separate the mom that I love and I care for and I respect from the effect that she has on me sometimes. And drawing some of those boundaries is important in your sense of self because, like I said, you feel safe now. Now you feel you can be yourself. Now you feel like you can thrive. That's kind of the general gist of that.
Yeah, you've learned a lot, both personally and you've learned about your family history and seen all those connections. How does that learning inform your counseling practice, or how does it help you do better with counseling other people?
Yeah. I think tapping into this part of my story and then hearing my clients and their stories, where they came from, their family dynamics, their immigration story from their family, the pressures they felt. It may not be anxiety, it might have been something else, it might be something more of an angry flavor, but understand that there's commonalities, there's common threads through each of these families that we see. Helps to, one, I think it helps me to have compassion for these stories, right? It helps me to really see each of the people that I work with as individuals, even within their family, even within their context. And it helps me to really walk with them and tease in their own journey of self-confidence, of finding more of themselves within that story. I think that really helps to tap into my story as well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope that our audience can be encouraged to seek out opportunities like that.
Yeah. I think there's a misconception about psychotherapy or counseling, is that there has to be something really wrong with you to come in. I couldn't say that was my case. I couldn't say that there was something, like I wasn't really depressed. I wasn't really super anxious. I was a little bit anxious, but still functional. I was able to do some things. I was able to go to school, go to college and succeed in those ways. But in understanding the story, my family story and my family dynamics, coming into counseling actually helped me to improve in a lot of ways I didn't know I was being held back. For instance, if that role of taking on someone's anxiety was passed down to me from my mom, how does that affect my relationships? Well, yeah, it's going to have a very distinct effect on my relationships. So, I started to question my own relationships with people. It's like, okay, what do I bring into this? Everyone's got something that they're dealing with. Everyone's got baggage of some sort. So what's mine, and how does that play into my relationships? I think getting into this discussion about family and how that affects it how that really affected me really helped to improve relationships. So I wasn't really dealing with a diagnosis of any kind, but therapy really helped me in my relationships, to be better in my relationships, to be able to have freedom and creativity in my relationships, and not be stuck into old patterns.
Okay. Wow. What were some of the patterns being in Asian American relationships?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any misunderstandings there, or are there particular ways that it becomes difficult to communicate those sort of emotions because I know there's an emphasis on community,
Mm-hmm.
especially in Chinese American culture.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways you've experienced and learned how to deal with those sort of things?
It's kind of a balance. One of the things that we do at the clinic, dealing at the intersection of culture and emotional health, is that we help people understand that it's not just two choices. It's just not a choice between your Chinese side. It's not just a choice between your American side. Acculturation, integration, getting along as a Chinese American actually means both. It's not an or proposition. It's an and proposition. So it's both Chinese and also American in my case. And some of my own kind of work in integrating those things helped me to realize that, yeah, there are some very, very good things about being Chinese, about coming from a communal culture. You are part of something. You're always part of something. You're always, for better or for worse, you know where you stand in the family, but you are part of a family. From the more American kind of side of these things, that learning that you do have your own voice, learning that even within culture you can be your own separate person, was also really, really important. So to answer your question, relationally, sometimes I would be in a friendship, a romantic relationship, whatever kind of relationship. When I came across someone who was reminiscent of my mom, maybe someone who was a worrier, someone who just was strung so tightly and wanted everyone else to know that they were worried about this, and so everyone else should worry about this, I would kind of distance myself from those people. I would kind of naturally, this wasn't even a conscious thing, but I would just say, okay, well, I can't be involved with that person. I can't be like at school and like in a work group with that person. It's just something that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel safe for me to do this. And so, I probably missed out on a lot of good relationships that way. And understanding that, other people could worry, I could still have a relationship with those people, but I could still have this safe sense of who I was and what I was worried about. Apart from that person, I think that really allowed me to enter into authentic relationships with people who might be a little more anxious than me,
Wow, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to try and give advice about these sort of worries and family dynamics to someone, what would you say are some simple steps to grow?
I would say, one, if you're not aware of your family story, you're not aware of your where you come from, it's good to ask. It's good to know. It's good to find out where you came from. What's your story? What's your family story of coming to the States? What's your family history? And the knowledge of that, the awareness of that, in all its beauty and all its ugliness and all of its pain and all of its joy, it's important because it has had an effect on who you are. It does have an effect on who you are today. And another thing I would say about learning your family story is hold it lightly. Is that hold it with a sense of grace. Hold it understanding that your family dealt with the circumstances that they were given. A lot of things they didn't choose to be a part of, but they, for better or for worse, were. So be graceful to them, and as you find yourself in this history, find yourself in this family, be graceful to yourself as well, because it's a struggle for everybody who's coming into their own, who's developing a sense of self, who's developing a sense of safety for themselves. It's natural to have starts and stops. It's natural to swing in one direction and then kind of pendulum back to the other direction, and then kind of find that happy medium where you can really be yourself, where you can really come into who you are. An example of that is, there's during this kind of phase, I was very much into the Asian American world, and everything had to be Asian American, and nothing could be American because that didn't speak to me. There's another pendulum going, another part of the journey where I wanted nothing to do with being Chinese. And so there was a rejection of those two pieces. But understanding and knowing that both of those pieces make up who I am was really important for me to find a good piece about myself.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
One last question is, you really seem to understand yourself as an individual, and you've been working hard and asking for help in ways for those sort of things. But you also recently became a father. You have a 7-month-old.
I do, yes.
So what are some of the things you're watching out for, taking your expertise about family dynamics and then looking at your own, looking forward to your own family? Yeah,
my wife always tells me, stop being a therapist. This is not a therapy thing. This is not an academic thing. This is not like a cerebral kind of thing. It just reminds me to be. It's a little bit cliche, but to be present in every moment with my son, with my family. There are worries, of course. I worry about who he's going to become. I worry about, is he going to have a good life? Is he going to be, a good kid? But understanding I don't have to transmit that to him. I don't have to lay that at his feet. I don't have to make that his responsibility. In reality, it's my responsibility. It's my wife's responsibility to raise him as a good kid. So if I free him from that, if I'm able to keep the worry to where it should be with me, hopefully I can give him the freedom to find himself, to be himself, to grow into who he is on his own. And as long as he knows that mom and dad love him, and mom and dad will always be there to support him, then I kind of sum that up to, okay, we did a good job. He knows that we love him. He knows that we're going to support him. We didn't hoist all this extra anxiety upon him, and he's free. And he's free to be himself. So yeah, that's what I hope. I think that's every parent's kind of hope and prayer, is that they can do that for their kid. So I don't think I'm too strange in that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate
that's all we
it.
have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. You shared a lot about your family history, and it's very interesting, and it's especially interesting how you're working on yourself. And this concludes our episode of Erasing Shame, the summer series on mental health. Be sure to give us feedback and follow us and subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, and iTunes And also, our information is on our website at erasingshame.com.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Erasing Shame About Mental Health. Visit our website for all of our episodes at erasingshame.com. Please subscribe on iTunes or YouTube and like us on Facebook.